Poverty, hunger, and inequality remain a big challenge for many, as millions of South Africans continue to struggle to meet their basic needs. Many families still face daily hardship, with children, young people, women, and even the elderly, even people living with disabilities among the most affected. New figures released by Stats SA paint a worrying picture of the gap between the rich and the poor, showing that too many people are still being left behind in this economy. For more, let's speak to South Africa's Statistician-General Risenga Maluleke to help us understand what these numbers mean and what needs to be done to change the situation. SG, thank you so much for the time. Appreciated this morning for joining us as well on Newzroom Afrika. Let's perhaps outline some of these numbers a little bit more, if you will. Just share some of the statistics you've gotten out of this latest Marginalized Groups Indicator report. Good morning.
And let me greet the viewers and indeed start off by saying that the Marginalized Group report is amongst the series of reports that we make available from Stats SA every year. And in this regard, particularly, I want to focus on issues of young people, women, and indeed older people. But specifically of the three groups, I would want to focus on older persons and share some numbers in relation to them. When we say older persons, we are talking of people that are 60 years and older, in that our population, 10.5% is accounted for by people over the age of 16.
Wow. And I mean, that's incredible. Salaries and wages for that same age group is what? Only 23% of the contribution. Grants are the primary income for them as well, which I suppose paints an interesting picture when one thinks about it, about retirement security and perhaps intergenerational dependency.
Well, there's something we should understand, but that by the time people reach the age of 60, they are already winding down. They are working life, their careers, and indeed, when you look at income, we will not be able to compare them readily with younger cohorts or age cohorts. But particularly when you come to that, we can see that amongst the four population groups, as in colored, Indian, Asian, Black African, and whites, the white population group still enjoys the highest income amongst them, followed by the Indian, Asian population group, followed by the coloreds and the Africans. Actually, the Indian, Asian population group is catching up with the white. Wow. Although the gap is still there, it's catching up with the white population group.
Very interesting, actually. If we move to perhaps just a focus on the youth here, 45.5%, that youth unemployment rate. Labor force participation, only at just above that 50% mark. I mean, this surely aims or showcases a mismatch between education, skills, and the demands of the labor force.
In South Africa, we are experiencing what we call structural unemployment. That is the kind of skills that we are producing through our education and training system. Doesn't match the jobs that are out there. And when you take that and you look at younger people, starting from just your ages of 15 to 24, and then even 25 to 34, what we are picking up is that they don't have experience yet. And that is the reason that makes their labor force participation relatively low compared to other age cohorts. Absorption rate is the number of those in working age that are employed. Their absorption rate remains lowest compared to other age cohorts. Whereas when you look at the absorption rate of older age cohorts, it tends to be a little higher, even if they don't have highest levels of education, because they have tended to gain skills or semi-skills in their work.
Wow, a very interesting one actually there. And even the not in employment and education or training, I mean, there are such massive disparities when it comes to that, because you'll find that even by women, by young women, by young men, that changes as well. And one wonders, maybe it's structural, maybe it's cultural factors. and it just continues to push the gender disparity even further.
What is happening is that, let us first look at ages 15 to 24, Aravile. In that age cohort, we have 10.3 million of them. Out of those, regardless of where they are, out of the 10.3 million, 3.5 million are not in education, employment or training. So they are not in employment, education or training. That returns a NEET rate of 34.5% or 34% rather. Now, when you extend the age from 15 to 34, we have about 20.45 million young people, regardless of where they are. Out of those, about 9 million are not in employment, education, or training.
Sure.
And the majority of them are Black African, rather female in this regard. So females remain vulnerable to labor markets, but generally, Black Africans are the ones that account for more than 90% of those not in employment, education, or training. And this is because Black Africans, the majority of them live in rural areas where they are far away from urban centers where they could take up employment.
Wow. And I think that tells you everything, because that's why they then would report the higher hunger rates, because that's women-led households, when 42.4% of households are headed by women, according to your data. It increases vulnerability, surely.
No doubt about that, Aravile. One of the things we should understand is that if you look at your provinces like Limpopo and the Eastern Cape, where you have more female-headed households because of our migratory labor patterns, because the men are out in urban centers, the women are remaining at home. But when you go to a province like the Northern Cape, where the population is even much smaller, 2.2 million people, that's where you find that the majority of female-headed households are vulnerable to hunger. Whereas in provinces like Limpopo, because of activities in agriculture, subsistence agriculture, and a little bit that goes into sales, most of them they produce to eat. Vulnerability to hunger is not as high as we see in places like the Northern Cape.
Has South Africa built up an environment that can assist those with disabilities? And I say that just because disability prevalence rises sharply with age, of course, and the education attainment for people with disabilities is also very low.
Let us start with the point that you are making, Aravile, that disability increases with age. The world over, we do have a challenge in capturing disability at birth, especially amongst developing and poor nations. Developed nations try their best. By the time the child is born, they already, when they come out of the hospital, and some of them in places like Europe, they even provide midwifery for children to be born at home. But they are able to diagnose disability. So with us in South Africa being a developing nation or an emerging market, one of the things is that some of the disabilities people were born with, but they have continued to live well until they are old. And that's when such disabilities are starting to show. So we will say they increase with age. It's because in our healthcare facilities, and it's not a South African issue, it's prevalent the world over that it's difficult to pick up disabilities at birth. The other thing is that there are common disabilities that are easy to pick up, but those that need advanced medical care or equipment are difficult to pick up.
Yeah, and that becomes so much tougher. The disparities across regional lines here, provincially, whether we talk about the Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, and Mpumalanga, that seems to have a higher disparity compared to some of the others.
Well, one of the things is that if you look at particularly Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape, it's an issue of being far away from urban centers, Whereas if you look at a place like the Western Cape, it affects the colored population the most than it affects the white population.
Yeah, and that, I think, sort of says a lot. Do you envision the use of this report to perhaps shape resource allocation at the very least? Has it done so before? Do you think it could in future?
Let us start by saying that population size is in the formula for equitable share of budgets. So even when the Minister of Finance reads out a budget, other than issues like budgets that are allocated vertically, like education, health, for intervention, when you look at the horizontal one, where you look at national, province, local government, district and local government, it's usually determined by population, and to a lesser extent, what we call economic activity. So where you need specific intervention coming possibly from a national level, transcending to a lower local government level, it could, but most of the time, this only assists in interventions within province than the budget that comes from the national purse.
Yeah, going to be very important in that allocation, exactly how things fare. Fact of the matter is that the big picture is there's still so many in the country, millions that are being left behind, and the disparity between rich and poor seems to still be ever so great as well. Statistician-General Risenga Maluleke, thank you so much for your time this morning, helping us just understand that marginal groups indicator report that has been released by Stats SA. Still to come, well, we'll give you the poll results, as well as the comments, and Valen will then take over and give you your final sports bulletin. Stay with us.